Excuse me, God, I'm sorry, stop, sorry, God, I'm sorry, excuse me. I would say it so fast and low that it sounded like gibberish while I repeatedly touched my head. Most people called it a tic, but I was just apologizing to God so that he wouldn't punish me. Because I learned throughout my upbringing in Jewish day school, in synagogue, and from my religious mother that God needs us to acknowledge him or else. Jews are supposed to praise God all the time, before we eat and after we eat, when entering a room and kissing the mezuzah over the doorframe, and by wearing coverings on our head, yarmulkes, as a reminder of his judgy presence above us. Looking back, this God seems like an insecure man with a mean streak, driving his celestial monster pickup and threatening to crush us with his oversized truck nuts. As a 9-year-old with OCD tendencies, it made total sense that God demanded this from me. If I wasn't careful, I would get picked on at school, or my father would spank me, or my brothers would tease me even more. I began this touching and muttering discreetly when I felt like I had done something wrong. I just cover my head and confess when I forgot to thank him for a meal, or talk back to my mother, or didn't show deference to one of the specific 613 Jewish laws. The more I did this ritual, the more I felt I needed to do it, especially when I was nervous, afraid, or just insecure. I was the third son out of 4 boys, and it was easy to have my behavior dismissed as just another one of my strange quirks. My 15-year-old brother was getting arrested, failing out of school, and consuming all my parents' time. Leo was just acting weird, nothing out of the ordinary. But eventually, all the uncomfortable questions and social pressure forced me to abandon the behavior, but the religious fear was still there. Our God is wrathful. And I was also taught that every year on Yom Kippur, he decides if he'll write you in the book of life or the book of death, depending on how hard you pray and committed you are to the 24-hour fast. As I got older, it made sense that God wouldn't just kill people for not observing this one day. I knew plenty of them who didn't. While my mother screamed at us to get in the car and go to synagogue for 8 hours, my brother and I delayed by teasing each other. God is going to kill you. No, he's going to kill you. He's going to kill you first. No, you. Get in the car. I was still afraid that God could always make things worse for me. My preteen and high school years were not happy ones. I was unpopular, and social situations never came natural to me, while my brothers easily glided into every social situation. My undiagnosed ADHD made it hard to read people, to make eye contact, and follow conversations. What made it even harder was that all the men in my house had an innate love of organized sports. Well, I didn't understand it at all. I wondered what was wrong with me. Every time I had to make a basket when my dad coached, try to catch a pop fly, or feebly attempt to throw any sort of ball, I felt like an imposter as a boy and hoped and prayed that some supernatural intervention might help. I developed a new neurosis because maybe God was the one who was making life so hard for me. Every morning, except on school days, I was convinced I had to say a specific prayer, or something really bad would happen. It needed to be an original prayer, praising him for specific things, and it needed to be heartfelt. I dreaded it and procrastinated for as long as possible. I'd stay in bed till the early afternoon or evening, putting it off. Dear God, thank you for helping me pass my math test and surviving dodgeball at PE. I hate dodgeball, but thank you for creating it. Please save me from other team sports. Here are 12 beautiful things I saw today and 6 specific things I want to apologize for. I'm also sorry for biting my nails when my mom told me not to. Please stop her from dragging me to the B'nai Israel Sisterhood luncheon where she'll force me to have conversations with a lot of old ladies. Please don't let my father surprise me with tickets to a basketball, ice hockey, or God, I mean you forbid, football game. You are great and merciful. My senior year of high school, I went to study in Israel, sharing dorms with 6 other guys where this prayer ritual became impossible. This was a program where parents sent their children to study for 1 semester, turning them into devout Jews. Well, that's what the plan was. Instead, it poked the first major hole in my unhealthy relationship with religion. Nothing bad happened once I stopped saying my unique custom prayer every morning, and actually it was the social group where I felt like I really fit in. Instead of praying, we drank, had sex with each other, smoked pot, and listened to rabbis tell us that things didn't literally happen that way in the Bible. The Red Sea didn't really part. Jews weren't lost in a tiny desert for 40 years, because have you ever met Jews? And and there wasn't a talking, burning bush. Those were just stories with lessons. I spoke to Israelis asking them what they did as Jews, and many just lived in Israel, not observing the Sabbath, praying regularly, or keeping kosher like we did at home. When I returned, I was a Zionist, but also much more agnostic. I wondered if God was really keeping score and influencing my life. The kids I always envied were blessed with popularity and easily blended into social situations. They weren't saying private, unique prayers. I went on the classic atheist journey and discovered Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, and other famous writers. I delighted in the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, which parodied religious arguments by postulating a giant bowl of sentient pasta and his holy son Noodle ran the world. I realized I could just walk away from these things. I still went with my family to high holiday services at an Orthodox synagogue. Men sat on one side and the women on the other behind a partition. After all, you didn't want the women to accidentally distract the men. But as a secretly gay guy who spent most of the boring service staring at the men anyway, I couldn't look at this as anything less than misogyny. I told my mother I was done. People claim Judaism encourages critical thinking, but it's often commentary on top of other commentary about what constitutes an unblemished fruit, how a prohibition against fire relates to turning on a cell phone, and volumes on why we need to separate meat and milk because of vague passage in the Bible. My mother, however, is a deeply religious child of Holocaust survivors. I love her, and I know that preserving our relationship means just biting my tongue. I don't understand how she can have faith in a God who has failed the Jewish people time and time again. She's convinced that God saved her parents during the Holocaust, but then God also let the rest of her family die while ignoring the prayers of 6 million others. She still says things like, "Our friend's store got broken into, but God was looking out for them and they caught the robbers." Wow, Mom, God must really hate your friends for letting their store get broken into in the first place. They should find out who their competitors are praying to. I've discovered with time that it's just easier not to argue with her deepest beliefs. It's not about being factual because you're arguing against a feeling, an old book, or something supernatural. When I'm around religious people, I remind myself that they're just trying to do good for the most part, as long as they leave me alone. I've asked my mother how she knows God is real, and she told me that when my grandmother died, she saw her spirit. Fair enough. I don't want to take that away from her. I don't want to take that away from anyone. I'm pretty open about my atheism now, but my mother is still in willful denial. Last November, we were driving to the furniture store to get her a new recliner so she can enjoy watching Fox News at ear-shattering volumes. Mom, we make a left here and the showroom's down the street. With God's help. We always say with God's help, which I never say because I've clearly communicated over decades that I'm an atheist. But she always mentioned it when I get on an airplane, go on a hike, go to the dentist, or that one time when I passed a kidney stone. I wanted to cry out, really? The God who ignored every prayer during the Holocaust? The same God who let you bury 2 of your sons and is actively giving cancer to babies is going to drop all the misery he's inflicting on the world to help us with this particular left turn. But nothing else. But I didn't say it. The fight's gone out of me. I'm just picking on an old lady who finds solace and comfort in this fantasy. Maybe it gives her the strength to go on after losing her 2 children and her husband. And can I really say I wouldn't turn to religious delusions to escape a sad reality? And I've come to find the collective suffering of our religious practices comforting. It reminds me of my childhood and my grandparents and all the people I've lost. Those memories of my religion are connected to a simpler time when everyone was young and all our problems seemed trivial. I also identify with most other Jews because we really do have the same mothers, suffer from cursed sinuses, and always embrace our status as outsiders. I tell people that I'm a Jewtheist. So I nodded at my mother and put the blinker on, saying, "Sure, I have complete faith that his almighty blessing will guide us through this perilous intersection." And we made the left turn with God's help.
Leo Dekelbaum. Leo!